They called it a shortcut, a festive route through the mountains. Just snow, they said. Just a parade. But I'd been on that ridge when the sky vanished. I'd felt the cold steel breath straight from a man's lungs, and when I warned them, when I begged them, the HOA silenced me. They called me dramatic, old, paranoid. They handed out cocoa and parade flyers like everything was under control. Then came the whiteout. Visibility dropped to 0. Engines froze. A school bus went missing. And Clarissa Duvall, the woman who opened the pass, was found sobbing beside her stalled car, begging for help she once laughed at. What followed was the longest 4 hours of my life. I wasn't just a homeowner anymore. I became the only line between their mistake and a mass casualty. You want to know what really happened on that mountain? I'll tell you. But first you need to understand one thing. The snow didn't kill anyone. Arrogance did. They say you never truly forget the sensation of a storm gathering, not the weather itself, but the oppressive silence that precedes it. The kind of stillness that clings to your skin like a suspended breath heavy with unspoken threat. I stood on my porch that morning, steaming coffee in hand, gazing as the breeze died above the distant ridge. That's when it struck me. That profound hush, that unnatural quiet. It wasn't merely snow approaching, it was something far more menacing. The ridge known as White Pine Pass loomed beyond our subdivision like a dormant beast, serene and deceptively calm. To most residents, it appeared benign, a picturesque shortcut, beloved by tourists and ambitious HOA visionaries. But after decades in mountain rescue across the Rockies, I'd hauled too many lifeless forms from icy wreckage to confuse scenic allure with true safety. My wife Allison appeared at the door behind me, drawing her shawl closer against the chill. "It's coming early this season," she murmured softly, peering past my shoulder at the brooding clouds. "Do you think it'll turn severe?" "I know it will," I answered, my voice steady with certainty. "The pass is going to vanish in a blinding veil. Once more." She never pressed for explanations. She understood. We'd relocated here after my retirement, from frontline rescue work, seeking tranquility, a slower pace, a place to raise our daughter far from urban turmoil. We'd discovered this enclave nestled at the mountain's foot, modern homes, warm families, and regrettably, an overreaching HOA that fancied themselves rulers of the terrain. And at that moment, those self-appointed rulers were toying with disaster. That very morning, an email arrived from the HOA. Subject community shortcut now open. Clarissa Duvall, the newly elected president, had sanctioned the reopening of the ancient fire road snaking through White Pine Pass. Residents are invited to utilize this bypass to avoid downtown congestion this winter, it proclaimed, capped with a cheerful emoji. A smiling face, no less. I reread it, frustration building. No reference to avalanche dangers. No alerts for blinding veil conditions. No contingency for adverse weather. Only upbeat proclamations and a self-satisfied snapshot of Clarissa in her crimson blazer gesturing triumphantly toward the pass as if she'd conquered it single-handedly. I knew that fire road intimately. In summer, it was rugged yet navigable. Come winter, it transformed into a lethal snare, steep grades, narrow lanes, no maintenance absent guardrails, and zero plowing without a formal county appeal, which I knew they hadn't submitted. A major storm loomed. I didn't require forecasts. My aching joints signaled it clearer than any broadcast. That evening, I trudged to the HOA office, a pristine structure adorned with faux architectural details and holiday lights twinkling prematurely. Inside, neighbors mingled over spiced cider. Clarissa held court near the entrance, alongside her aide Michael, beaming as she distributed maps of the pass and invitations to the first annual winter parade. My stomach sank. A parade, I interjected, advancing. Clarissa pivoted, her expression blooming with that polished, performative warmth. "Russell, glad you could join us. Indeed, along the newly accessible path, it'll be charming. Families are urged to adorn their SUVs as festive sleighs. So heartwarming, don't you agree?" "It's reckless," I stated bluntly. "You're directing families with children up an abandoned mountain route days before the season's fiercest blizzard." Her grin held firm. "We've reviewed the forecasts. Accumulation appears controllable. Moreover, the pass served generations reliably." "It was sealed shut for good cause," I retorted sharply. "Are you familiar with blinding veil conditions? One instant the path is visible, the next, You're inverted in a ravine entombed. Clarissa's gaze sharpened the facade cracking. Mr. Merrick, we appreciate your passion, but I believe your history is clouding your perspective. This isn't a battlefield. It's a neighborhood celebration. Exactly, I countered, until the initial vehicle plunges over the edge. Silence descended. I sensed the stares, that familiar discomfort from fieldwork days when bearers of grim truths were shunned. I delivered unwelcome realities. Countless times. Now I was merely the Cassandra no one heeded. Clarissa leaned in, tone clipped. The event proceeds. Attend if you wish or abstain. But refrain from stirring unrest. We've received reports about your forum posts. I started to respond, but Allison's imagined counsel restrained me. Choose wisdom over fury, Russ. Be the voice of reason. I breathed deeply. This will end in regret. She responded only with a strained grin and a subtle nod. Evening, Mr. Merrick. Departing, the air felt sharper than upon arrival. That bone-deep freeze, not from temperature, but from foreknowledge of impending catastrophe and helplessness to avert it. That night, I pored over archived terrain records from my former post, scrutinizing satellite views of the ridge, cross-referencing past patterns. My gut was infallible. Dawn brought skies the hue of charred ash. Flurries commenced, not whimsical, but relentless, the sort that accumulates swiftly, conceals treacherous ice, and avalanches unexpectedly. White Pine Pass lay unprepared, as did our entire community. By midday, powder had blanketed roofs and half-engulfed signs. Yet, HOA contractors, hired landscapers in mismatched gear, labored to dismantle long-standing barriers at the fire road's mouth. It was formalized. Clarissa Duvall had forcibly revived White Pine Pass. They lacked genuine plows, merely a leased skid steer scraping sporadically at frozen gravel with workers scattering salt haphazardly. No official permit, no risk assessment, no expert evaluation. From my driveway's edge, thermos gripped tightly, I observed them dismantle the robust county-installed barrier erected in 2017, post a deadly chain collision in comparable conditions. Neighbor Jim Coursey approached, trudging through drifts. Are they truly proceeding? I nodded somberly, utterly committed. Clarissa deems it emancipating the pass, claims it revives neighborhood bonds. Jim sighed deeply, more akin to inviting catastrophe. My brother barely escaped with his life there in '99. Gazing upward to the tree line, the pass resembled a delicate frosting, pure, gentle, enticing. That was the peril. To individuals like Clarissa, aesthetics equated security. Experienced cautions were mere pessimism. Later, a formal missive arrived beneath my door, luxurious stock with gilded edges, HOA emblem prominent. My name emblazoned. Cease and desist, notification dissemination of fear-based commentary. Accusations of eroding communal harmony via unsubstantiated alarmism. They referenced my forum entries, linking official warnings, avalanche alerts, and archived footage entries, now vanished. Clarissa escalated further. The notice concluded with veiled menace. Persistent alarmist rhetoric may incur penalties and additional measures per bylaw. 6.4b. I shared it with Allison. She perused it twice, folding precisely. She craves dominion, not dialogue. She'll reap ruins if she persists, I grumbled. The following morning, I passed the HOA office once more. Festive bunting now fluttered across the fire road entrance, bright colors whipping in the rising breeze. Child-drawn signs proclaimed parade route this way, adorned with smiling snowmen and candy canes sketched in eager crayon strokes. A cluster of families gathered around Clarissa as she posed for newsletter photographs, radiant, while wielding oversized scissors to slice a ceremonial ribbon with theatrical flair. She caught sight of me and waved enthusiastically, her smile as polished as ever. Mr. Merrick, we do hope you'll join the celebration. Only if I bring rescue gear, I replied, my tone flat. Her expression flickered just for an instant before the mask slid back into place. I watched her distribute glossy laminated flyers, urging residents to embellish their vehicles for the White Pine Winter Drive set for Sunday morning. Projected turnout, more than 80 vehicles. No emergency backups, no communication plan, no warming hubs. Only unbridled optimism and willful blindness. As dusk settled, long shadows stretched across the valley like accusing fingers. I lingered outdoors until the biting chill numbed my skin. The gale shifted direction again. I inhaled the sharp metallic tang of imminent heavy powder, the silence before the onslaught. I had exhausted every courteous Avenue warnings messages, forum, threads, official reports. All that remained was readiness for the aftermath. Saturday dawn found me at the HOA's invitation-only emergency planning session, held in the opulent Ridgeview Community Center, more luxury lodge than functional facility, with soaring stone pillars, plush leather chairs, and a fireplace that had never known real flames. I arrived wearing my faded Unit 12 jacket, not for intimidation, but because temperatures were plunging, and because it anchored me to the man I'd been before retirement, before being dismissed by those who mistook social media trends for expertise. Heads swiveled as I entered. Clarissa spotted me instantly. Immaculate in gray cashmere and polished boots, clipboard clutched like armor, her jaw tightened at the sight of my sleeve patch. "Mr. Merrick," she said smoothly, "this is a private session for board members and registered attendees. Your name isn't on the roster." "I'm not here to cast votes," I answered. "I'm here to avert disaster." Murmurs ceased. Roughly a dozen souls sat in neat rows, board members, eager volunteers, Michael tapping furiously on his tablet. A whiteboard at the front bore the heading, "Winter Parade Logistics," in elegant blue script. I drew a steady breath, advanced to the front, and placed a thick envelope on the table. Inside, satellite imagery, NOAA blinding veil forecasts, road surface temperature graphs, records of prior incidents on White Pine Pass historical affidavits. Everything. "Examine these closely," I urged. "This pass has a proven record of total erasure events. The last major episode in 2017, 3 vehicles overturned, 1 life lost. That's why the county permanently barred it. Maintenance has been non-existent ever since." Uneasy shifting filled the room. "You're not merely organizing a festive caravan," I pressed on. "You're directing over 80 vehicles, many carrying children along an unplowed corridor just as a powerful pressure front arrives. Barometric plunge, combined with dominant winds, guarantees zero visibility at the summit." I faced Clarissa directly. "Reopening that route means gambling with innocent lives. For what a holiday snapshot." Her lips curved into a thin, practiced smile. "We thank you for your input, Mr. Merrick. However, we've consulted reliable sources. The AccuWeather application predicts clear conditions until evening." I stared incredulous. "You're weighing a consumer app against NOAA data and certified meteorological analysis." Michael interjected without lifting his eyes. "Clarissa has coordinated with a popular local weather influencer, over 50,000 followers." I nearly laughed. "That influencer shares pet memes. I've led active operations on that pass. I've recovered bodies locked in frozen seats. This isn't fear-mongering, it's hard-earned truth." Clarissa approached slowly, her refined poise radiating like expensive perfume. With delicate fingers, she slid my documents aside, as if they soiled the tabletop. "I recognize that stepping away from high-stakes work can be challenging," she said sweetly. "That action-oriented individuals sometimes struggle in quieter seasons. But this is a secure, family-oriented community. We refuse to cancel a joyful gathering based on apocalyptic hypotheticals." I inhaled deeply. Pride was immovable. "Clarissa," I said evenly, "ridicule me if it helps. But when radios fail, when the first vehicle skids, when a child is trapped in the blinding veil, mine will be the number dialed. And I'll answer because that's who I am." A hush lingered. A flicker of uncertainty crossed faces. Then Clarissa pivoted to the group with renewed brightness. "Let's proceed." Michael, parade order review. Laughter resumed. Someone passed her cider as if I'd been a minor nuisance. I was excused with polite indifference. Driving home through thickening flurries, tires crunching over hidden ice, the ridgeline loomed ghostly under leaden skies. The atmosphere grew denser, heavier. I recognized every omen. Allison greeted me with steaming soup and a knowing glance. "They refuse to hear you." She rested her hand on mine. "Then do what you've always done. Prepare regardless." That night, I uncovered my trusty Polaris snowcat in the garage. Hours passed, checking fluids, sharpening the blade, refueling. I messaged an old sheriff contact. Emailed Unit 12's regional director. I refused to wait for collapse. I compiled supplies chains, flares, insulated blankets, radio boosters. If they wouldn't halt the caravan, I would stand ready when it unraveled. Outside powder resumed, gentle at first, then relentless. The mountain was scripting its own merciless narrative. And the HOA remained oblivious, marching straight into its pages. That afternoon, I phoned the county roads office again. The clerk's voice carried the weary edge of someone who'd fielded too many frantic calls over the years. He confirmed the HOA had submitted a temporary access form for the fire road, but nothing about a large-scale event, no mention of the caravan, no weather contingency filings. Anything on emergency protocols, I pressed. A pause. Not a single line. I gave him my name. Recognition dawned. Merrick Unit 12, Merrick. The one who hauled that school bus out of the ravine back in '05. The same. He lowered his voice. Off the record, there's a brutal front sliding down from the north. Pressure's crashing. NOAA's calling for total erasure up high by tomorrow night. That left us barely 72 hours. 72 hours until families in garland-draped minivans climbed that pass, children waving from back seats, trusting the adults who'd promised them a magical winter drive. I pictured Clarissa at the head of the line, perched in her gleaming Range Rover like a monarch on parade, smiling for cameras that wouldn't be there when everything went white. That evening, I dragged the old footlocker from the back of the closet. Dust rose as I lifted the lid. Inside lay folded maps, laminated evacuation overlays. Incident logs, yellowed at the edges, relics of a life I'd promised Allison was behind us. But this disaster was unfolding in our own backyard. My family lived here, my neighbors, the teenagers I coached in basic wilderness survival at the rec center. I sat at the dining table laptop, glowing, firing off measured but urgent emails to the sheriff's liaison, to the county weather station, to my former sergeant, now a regional FEMA coordinator. I didn't beg for intervention. I simply laid out facts, attached data, asked for eyes on the situation. Allison moved quietly around me, brewing tea, sliding a notepad closer when my pen ran dry. Without a word, she added a single line in her neat handwriting beneath my bullet points. Remind them about the children. Sunday morning broke beneath a sky the color of cold steel. The neighborhood had transformed overnight into a holiday postcard, roofs, glazed white porch lights haloed by frost, children shrieking with delight as they hurled snowballs. But to my eyes, the light was wrong, flat, shadowless, the kind that precedes entrapment. I'd seen it too often on ridges, just like this one, moments before the world erased itself. Clarissa's flyers still fluttered from every mailbox, bright and defiant. White Pine Winter Drive, bring your holiday spirit. Sunday at 11 a.m. Line up at Ridge Trailhead. Dress up your vehicles, awards for best sleigh theme. Full color Clarissa's looping signature clip art reindeer prancing across the top. Allison held one up, shaking her head. She's all in now. She has to be, I said. Canceling would mean admitting fault. And Clarissa Duvall doesn't admit fault. At 8:30, another knock, sharp, official. An HOA volunteer in a navy fleece handed me a crisp envelope. My name in block letters. Inside on heavy cream stock. Formal notification of non-compliance. Mr. Merrick, your continued circulation of inflammatory materials and commentary has been noted. These actions violate bylaws 4.2a, 4.2c, and 6.1. Failure to comply may result in fines, loss of amenities, and legal review. Ridgeview Pines, HOA Board of Directors. I stared at the words. Warning people about lethal weather was now inflammatory. Allison's voice rose. They think paper threats will silence you. They don't need to silence me forever, I said quietly. Just long enough for their photo op to finish. I retreated to the garage and began loading the Polaris winch, cable tow straps, thermal blankets, flares, a freshly charged CB with extended antenna. I tuned to emergency channels. Static already hissed louder than usual. At 9:15, my phone rang. Deputy Mason. Russ, you still near White Pine? Right at the base. We're thin today. Major pileup out on 38 has pulled every unit west. Nobody available near the pass for hours. Thought you should know. A pause. And between us, I'd shut that thing down if I could. Too late. He exhaled. You still got that old plow rig running. Fueled and ready. Godspeed then. By 10:30, the street filled with revving engines and laughter. Families fastened tinsel to roof racks, strapped cardboard sleigh runners to minivans, affixed plush antlers to side mirrors. The HOA had even erected a kickoff station, thermoses of cider holiday jazz piping from a speaker. Clarissa arrived in her pearl-white Range Rover, swathed in golden ribbon red wool coat, vivid against the snow. Children rushed to her, A photographer snapped shots for the newsletter. I stood by my mailbox, Polaris idling beside me. Melissa watched from the window, worry creasing her young face. "Why are they doing this, Dad?" "Because some people value being right over being safe," I told her. "And others are afraid to challenge them." "Will you stop them?" I gave her a weary smile. "No, sweetheart. I'm going to follow them." As the convoy formed, Clarissa cruised slowly past our house. She lowered her window cheeks, flushed with triumph. "We're heading up Russell. You can stay here and sulk or join your community. But if you're waiting to say, 'I told you so,' save your breath." I offered no reply. I simply donned my gloves, climbed into the Polaris, and eased into position at the rear. The caravan rolled forward SUVs, Jeeps, minivans in cheerful pairs, hazard lights blinking like festive signals. Horns tooted merrily as they turned toward the pass tires crunching up the winding climb flanked by snow-laden pines. It was 11:03 when the first flakes returned, fine sharp swirling like powdered glass. By 11:12, the road behind us dissolved into fog. By 11:17, even the lead vehicles could see no farther than 20 feet. By 11:20, Clarissa's golden ribbon vanished completely into the blinding veil. This was no ordinary snowfall. This was total erasure. The gale didn't roar. It whispered, insidious, relentless, sliding down the mountainside like a living thing weaving powder into invisible fists that seized the road and squeezed. By the time I reached the first steep incline, the world had flattened into a featureless pallor. No depth, no horizon. Powder no longer fell. It hurled itself sideways upward in frantic spirals. I held the Polaris steady in low gear, tracing the fading grooves of tires already surrendering to fresh drifts. Wipers thudded uselessly against the windshield, carving fleeting arcs before the veil reclaimed them. Somewhere ahead, the caravan had been swallowed whole. Occasional red glows of taillights flickered through the murk like embers drowning in milk. The CB crackled faintly. Range Rover 4 to base, anyone copying signal fading. I keyed the mic. "This is Merrick on White Pine. Anyone from the Winter Drive, respond." Only static answered, thick and mocking. I eased to a stop, glanced at the dash thermometer, 23 degrees and plunging. This was the pivot point. Every seasoned responder dreaded the instant a scenic outing mutated into survival. I killed the engine, stepped out. The gale slapped my face, stinging like shattered glass. Farther down the slope, the stragglers of the convoy were just entering the grade. I waved arms overhead, but fogged windows and holiday tunes drowned me out. Children bounced in back seats, dressed as elves, oblivious. They still believed this was an adventure. I activated my old emergency beacon, a compact GPS transmitter I hadn't touched in years. Battery still strong. I clipped it to my vest, punched the code into my phone, and waited. 30 seconds. Green blink, signal sent. 80 miles west, at Mountain Rescue Unit 12 headquarters, someone would see that signature ping. If Captain Darla Pruitt was on shift, and I knew her habits, she'd recognize it instantly. I wasn't authorized to request formal deployment anymore, but I could summon watchful eyes. I crept forward again. Visibility 10 feet, perhaps less. Trees loomed as pale phantoms. Every curve felt like a trap. I didn't search long for the first signs of trouble. A blue minivan sat canted to the right, hazards pulsing weakly. I pulled alongside, climbed out. The driver's door swung open, and a man in his 30s stumbled toward me, cheeks raw. "We can't see anything," he shouted over the howl. My daughter's panicking in back. Through the iced rear window, I glimpsed a small girl clutching a plush reindeer, tears streaking her face. Cabin heat barely held. "Engine keeps stuttering," he added, voice cracking. "Stay put," I ordered. "Run the heater only as needed. If it dies, pile every coat on her. Do not exit unless you see lights or hear my knock." "Clear." He nodded frantically. "Is rescue coming?" "I'm here now," I said, handing him a spare thermal blanket before returning to the Polaris. Deeper into the pass, conditions worsened. The gale shifted unpredictably, sculpting drifts that rose like walls. At the third switchback, two sedans rested nose to tail against an embankment, one spun the other, clipped in the chaos. In the first, an elderly woman gripped the wheel knuckles white, afraid to move. In the second, two brothers, one teen, one younger, bickered over next steps. I shut off their engines, cracked windows for ventilation, distributed blankets, planted crimson flares behind each bumper as beacons. "Keep moving," I told myself. "Mark and move." Halfway up, three vehicles clustered on the same shoulder. Parents huddled outside, phones useless. A boy in oversized mittens waved from a Jeep's rear window. I eased past, signaling stay inside, help inbound. The powder deepened. The Polaris labored. Just when I feared I'd bogged down a glint, caught my headlamp, golden ribbon askew. Clarissa's Range Rover sat sideways across the lane. I halted 20 feet back, secured a tow line, and advanced on foot. The gale nearly bowled me over. Driver's door hung open, flapping wildly. I reached it. Clarissa huddled in the passenger seat, coat pulled tight, shivering uncontrollably. Her eyes met mine, wide, stripped of every layer of polish. "You injured?" I yelled. She shook her head, then nodded, uncertain. "Some kept going," she whispered, voice breaking. I tried to stop them. They couldn't hear. She looked diminished, soaked lips tinged blue. I retrieved a Mylar wrap from her own emergency kit, ironically present, and draped it over her. "Beacon's active," I told her. "My old unit has eyes. They'll escalate if needed." "I didn't believe," she murmured. "No," I said. "You didn't." She grasped my sleeve weakly as I turned. "Russell, don't abandon them, please." "I'm not," I replied. "That's why I followed." I sealed her door, thumped the roof once, stay inside, and returned to the Polaris. The storm wasn't finished. Neither was I. Higher up the pass, narrowed trees thinned to skeletal outlines. The veil became absolute, no sky, no ground, only swirling oblivion. I hadn't advanced far when brake lights appeared in fractured clusters, vehicles scattered like broken ornaments. The erasure had struck mid-caravan. A Subaru nosed into a drift hood, crumpled. Behind it, an SUV crumpled against a pine driver's side, accordioned. I deployed my emergency sled and threaded between them. First, the Subaru, a young mother rocking in her seat, toddler wailing behind. I tapped the glass gently. She lowered it a crack. "Responder," I said calmly. "You're stable, engine running." She nodded through tears. "We can't see where we are. Stay warm. Crack front vents only. Help's en route." I passed another blanket for the child and moved on. The SUV held 4 teens, bloodied nose, no airbags, all awake. One boy kept trying the door. "Stay inside," I commanded. "Conserve heat and fuel, no wandering." Marked their windshield with green ribbon, checked and stable. Then I saw the yellow bulk half buried ahead. A school bus. Pine Ridge Charter stenciled on the side, tilted precariously, front wheels in a ditch. Driver's window shattered. Inside at least a dozen children, silent and wide-eyed, bundled but shivering. This changed everything. I climbed the bus steps, slowly, boots crunching on shattered glass. The driver, an older man with an ice-frosted beard, looked up at me as if I'd materialized from the storm itself. "Tried the radio," he said hoarsely. "Dead air." "You did right staying put," I replied. Inside, the children sat in unnatural quiet. No wails, just wide eyes tracking my every move. Cheeks flushed from cold, small hands clutching coats or siblings. One little girl near the front gripped a lunchbox like a lifeline. I knelt beside her. "Hey, kiddo, you holding up?" She nodded, then pointed 2 seats back. "My brother's really cold." The boy, maybe 7, was curled tight, lips pale. I moved fast, back to the Polaris for the heavy-duty thermal wraps, the mirrored ones that bounce body heat back like sunlight. I handed them out, enlisting the older kids to help tuck the little ones in snugly. Then I gave them purpose. "Listen up, team," I said, raising my voice just enough to cut through the gale outside. "You're all official helpers now. Your mission: keep everyone warm and awake. Talk, sing, tell stories, whatever it takes. No napping. Can I count on you?" Solemn nods. One boy in the back even managed a shaky thumbs up. Another started a quiet round of jingle bells. The sound, small, defiant, warmed me more than any heater. As I stepped off the bus, my phone vibrated against my chest. A miracle text slipped through a fleeting signal window. "Darla Pruitt. Beacon received. Location confirmed. County Sayre en route. ETA 90 minutes. 90 minutes in these conditions felt like a lifetime. Relief surged, but I shoved it down. 90 minutes was still too long for those who'd pushed farther up the ridge. I scanned the void ahead. Some vehicles had kept going, driven by momentum denial or sheer panic. I keyed the CB again, sweeping frequencies. A faint reply finally broke through. "Teams mobilizing from West Base. Stand by." I transmitted a concise sitrep, multiple stalled vehicles, children aboard bus, possible cold, injuries, no fatalities yet. I could anchor the lower group until help arrived. Then I added unknown number farther upridge, proceeding to locate. Negative Merrick, came Darla's voice, sharp even through static. "Hold position. Reinforcements inbound." I was already strapping another bundle to the sled. I glanced back downhill. Dozens of hazard lights glimmered faintly through the veil like trapped fireflies. The caravan frozen mid-festival. Clarissa was somewhere down there, wrapped in silver mylar, learning the taste of fear. But others had charged ahead, convinced the worst lay behind them. Snow doesn't negotiate with optimism. I fired the Polaris, aimed its fog lamps into the maelstrom, and advanced. The veil thickened to absolute white. No horizon, no ground, only swirling chaos where light dissolved. I navigated by memory, and the faint contour of the road etched in my mind from countless training runs. Never like this. Never alone with families scattered inside the storm. The CB had gone silent again. Even static abandoned me. I swept the spotlight across the embankments. Nothing. Then a weak pulse of hazard lights far to the right half, swallowed by a drift. A compact car buried to the doors. I anchored the sled to a sturdy pine weighted knee-deep. At the driver's window, a young couple, late 20s. The woman cradled an infant, in the rear face ashen. Breath fogged the glass in frantic clouds. I rapped gently. The man cracked the window an inch. "Please," he said before I spoke. We slid, trying to turn. Exhaust is packed. I shut it off. Is it safe to restart? I checked the tailpipe, nearly sealed. They'd been minutes from carbon monoxide sleep. "Keep it off," I instructed. "Stay bundled. I'll return." He clutched my sleeve. Wait, there was an SUV ahead of us. They'd stopped. Driver said their phone died. Maybe 5 minutes before we went off. I marked their car with red ribbon priority extraction and pressed on. Visibility shrank to arm's length. The compass needle jittered uselessly. Powder hammered the hood like buckshot. Then a sound that wasn't wind. A scream, raw, human. I killed the engine. Another cry muffled but unmistakable. I followed it on foot. A black SUV tilted nose down in a shallow gully, rear hatch open. A woman in a yellow coat waved both arms, face contorted. She staggered toward me through the drifts. "My husband's pinned," she sobbed. The dash collapsed on his leg. I couldn't free him. "Kids are inside staying warm, please." I tossed her a thermal wrap and sprinted to the vehicle. The man grimaced against the caved-in console, knee trapped. No arterial bleed, small mercy. The twins in back huddled under a damp sleeping bag, eyes huge. "I'm stuck," he rasped through clenched teeth. "I see it, hold still." No hydraulic tools. But I had ratchet straps and the Polaris winch. I looped a strap around the seat frame, anchored to the tow hitch. Slow reverse metal groaned, protested, then yielded inches. Enough. He dragged his leg free with a guttural cry. Bruised, swollen, but intact. I half-carried him to the sled mat, dragged it back to the Polaris where his wife waited, tears freezing on her lashes. The twins scrambled in beside them. "Heat on full," I told her. "I'm taking you downhill to the bus group." She stared past me into the white. "There are more." "Dozens," I said. Still waiting on a parade that should never have started. I turned the Polaris toward the lower ridge, towing the sled behind. The injured man groaned with every bump, but clung tight. The veil refused to lift. If anything, it pressed closer. We reached the bus again. The children's singing had grown stronger off-key, but fierce. I helped the family aboard. The driver took the injured man gently. "Keep him awake," I instructed. "Rescue's 90 minutes out, maybe less now." He nodded grimly. I stepped back into the storm. The world had shrunk to my breath inside the scarf and the low growl of the engine. Behind me, a community was discovering the cost of trusting the wrong voice. Ahead, others might already be paying it. The mountain wasn't done, but neither was I. The storm had woven a silence so profound, it felt as though the mountain itself held its breath. Powder clawed at my goggles, swirling in mad vortices that turned the world upside down. I could no longer discern the road's incline, only the relentless shift beneath the tracks and the fogged rhythm of my own breathing. That's when the first blue strobes pierced the veil behind me, slow, deliberate, unstoppable. Search and rescue had breached the pass. 2 county snowcats emerged from the murk, like armored beasts, flanked by figures in high-visibility jackets and helmets materializing as if conjured. Their headlights carved tunnels through the chaos, revealing the marked vehicles' I'd flagged flares still burning defiant red against the onslaught. The lead snowcat ground to a halt beside my Polaris. I trudged over legs heavy with frost. The side window lowered, revealing a face I hadn't seen in years but would recognize anywhere. "Russell Merrick," Captain Darla Pruitt said, voice cutting clean through the gale. You really know how to throw a party. Never claimed otherwise, I shouted back, throat raw. We locked onto your beacon. Couldn't believe the scope this many vehicles, 80 plus, started. I've tagged what I could reach. Kids on the bus, elders scattered one possible fracture. Worst cluster lower down. Some pushed higher past dead man's turn maybe. She muttered a curse. Why in God's name were civilians up here? HOA festive caravan, I said. One phrase was enough. Darla's eyes hardened. She keyed her radio voice crisp with command. 2 snowcats peeled downhill to secure the main group and begin clearing lanes. Snowmobiles roared toward the bus with medics aboard. Another team veered toward the tree line to erect heated shelters. You still solid to guide the upper sweep, she asked. I checked my fuel gauge, flexed numb fingers. Got chains, heat packs, and too many ghosts riding shotgun. Let's end this. She clapped my shoulder hard, familiar. Missed having you out here, Merrick. Didn't miss the weather, I grunted, already swinging the Polaris around. We pushed higher beyond any point reason would allow, and there they were. A silver Tahoe buried nose first in a drift, windows iced opaque. Inside, a family of 5, drowsing dangerously. The mother's eyes fluttered open as I wrapped the glass. Tears cut clean tracks through frost on her cheeks when she saw the rescue insignia. Farther along, a sedan rested at a sickening angle against a boulder, one wheel spinning uselessly. The driver, a teenage boy, was gone. The mood shifted instantly. Darla signaled her tracker ski-mounted specialists trained for zero visibility foot searches. We fanned into a tight grid, voices calling the boy's name every 5 seconds like human sonar. Minutes stretched, hope thinned. Then a faint reply carried on a merciful eddy of wind. They located him 20 yards off the embankment, curled fetal behind a toppled log jacket over his head. Consciousness fading. Another few minutes and the cold would have claimed him permanently. We hauled him back. His parents met us at the flare line, collapsing around him in wordless, shaking relief. That became the rhythm for the next grueling hours, vehicle by vehicle, flare by flare. I located and marked. Darla's crews extracted and treated. The gale fought every inch, trying to bury our tracks before we could finish. By the time we reached Dead Man's Turn, the infamous single-lane ledge with its sheer 50-foot drop visibility had collapsed entirely. Fresh tire grooves scarred the snow, leading straight to the edge. No vehicle in sight. My gut twisted. Darla joined me on foot. We swept flashlights along the precipice. A metallic glint answered far below. She exhaled sharply. It's perched. I'm going down. You certain? I was already rigging the winch line. Cover the top. I'll handle the risk. I rappelled into the abyss rope, biting through gloved hands, powder blasting sideways. 20 feet down, the SUV came into view, teetering on a packed drift against a fragile sapling, 2 wheels dangling over nothing. Inside, a young woman, 19 at most, alone, paralyzed fingers bloodless on the wheel. I tapped the window, held up my badge through the frost. She stared unblinking. I shouted reassurance. Slowly, she cracked the glass. I've got you, I told her. Don't move. We'll lift you out inch by inch. Her whisper barely carried. Will I fall? Not on my watch. It took 20 agonizing minutes. Darla's team above rigged pulleys, counterweights, a second snowcat for anchor. We hauled the vehicle back onto solid ground like reeling in something too heavy for the line. When she stepped out, legs buckled. I caught her, wrapped her in silver, guided her to the sled. Night was falling. Not that color had meaning here, but the cold sharpened its teeth. We rounded up the final stragglers near the summit and began the long, cautious descent. Dozens of vehicles left abandoned, entombed in drifts, but every soul accounted for. Not one life surrendered. Not this time. At the base, Darla's crews had transformed chaos into order, triage, tent-glowing warm heaters, humming medics moving with quiet efficiency. Children swaddled like silver burritos sipped broth. Parents clutched steaming mugs, faces vacant with delayed shock. And there, on a folding chair beneath the canopy, sat Clarissa Duvall. Coat zipped to her throat, shoulders bowed, hands trembling around an untouched cup. No blazer, no clipboard. Just a woman stripped bare by consequence. She looked up as I approached. For the first time, I saw raw humility in her eyes, and beneath it something heavier, shame. Her voice barely rose above the generator's low hum. How many vehicles? 39 required hands-on extraction, I said, easing onto the bench beside her. Another dozen flagged for later recovery. 1 family airlifted early hypothermia. They'll recover fully. She absorbed each detail slowly, as if translating it into a language she'd never spoken. And the children, all safe, I replied. Not because of careful planning, because strangers turned into rescuers when everything unraveled. She stared into her cooling cider hands, trembling so violently the liquid rippled. Tears traced silent paths down wind-burned cheeks. I thought I was building something beautiful, she whispered. After the last board collapsed in scandal, I wanted to restore trust. Holiday lights, shared traditions, a sense of belonging. I convinced myself the past would be our perfect backdrop. I let the silence stretch. She needed to hear her own words echo. I dismissed you, she continued, voice cracking. Saw your warnings as sabotage. You were trying to protect them, and I labeled it negativity. I almost turned a celebration into a graveyard. She pressed gloved hands to her face, shoulders shaking. I sat quietly, the weight of the day settling into my bones. Exhaustion, relief, anger, all braided together. You weren't the first to ignore seasoned voices, I said at last. You won't be the last. But you wagered lives for optics. Few get the chance to undo that kind of mistake. She lifted her head, eyes red-rimmed. I don't know how to face them now. Start with the truth, I told her. Walk into the next gathering and own every inch of it. No spin, no excuses, just honesty. They'll demand my recall. Perhaps, I said. Perhaps that's exactly what should happen. She flinched. But real leadership, I added, isn't about staying on the throne. It's about falling, getting up and wearing the bruises openly. She searched my face, looking for judgment or absolution. I offered neither. Around us, the camp pulsed with quiet humanity. A small boy in a silver cocoon helped his sister warm her hands around a mug of soup. A teenager surrendered his scarf to an elderly neighbor without prompting. Medics shared tired laughs over coffee, adrenaline ebbing into bone-deep weariness. Clarissa watched it all as if seeing her community for the first time. These people trusted me, she murmured, and somehow they still do. They'll trust you more when you stop pretending infallibility, I said. We sat in companionable silence, while families reunited, tow trucks rumbled in, and children were carried sleeping to warmed vehicles by parents whose hands still shook. An hour later, I made one final sweep of the cleared pass, snowcat standing sentinel trail markers glowing softly in the lifting fog. The gale had finally spent itself. Flurries dwindled to lazy flakes drifting in weak moonlight. When I returned to the tent, Clarissa was no longer seated. I assumed she'd slipped away to avoid further confrontation. I was wrong. She stood before a loose circle of residents, neighbors, volunteers, board members, some bandaged, others cocooned in blankets. No microphone, no photographer. Just her voice, raw and unsteady. I need to speak, she said. Conversation hushed. She scanned the faces lingering on mine for a steadying moment. I was wrong. A ripple of surprise passed through the group. Someone gasped softly. I was wrong to force the pass open. Wrong to override expert warnings. Wrong to silence anyone who dared disagree. My arrogance nearly cost lives today. If not for Russell Merrick and the rescue teams who answered our distress, many of us wouldn't be standing here. Her voice wavered, but held. I don't ask forgiveness tonight. I ask only that you hold me accountable. From this day forward, I will lead with humility, or I will step aside entirely. She stepped back into the crowd. No applause, no boos, just heavy, exhausted silence. Sometimes silence is the most honest response a community can offer. That night, I drove home through streets strangely peaceful under fresh powder. Allison met me at the door with a thick blanket and strong coffee. Melissa had waited up, eyes wide, at the television coverage flickering across the screen. They're calling you a hero, Dad. I shook my head. Just a neighbor who refused to stay silent. Melissa hugged me fiercely, wordless. I held her longer than usual, breathing in the scent of home. Outside, the mountain had fallen quiet again. For the first time in days, I let myself exhale. By the following week, sunlight had returned, thin winter light, low, and golden, spilling across the pines like tentative forgiveness. Snow still piled in grimy banks along the roads, but the bite had left the air. You could stand outside without your face freezing. Birds tested the silence again. Cleanup crews worked around the clock. Tow trucks growled up and down the pass, dragging out abandoned vehicles, dented fenders, shattered windshields. Festive decorations frozen stiff like relics from a dream gone wrong. The county issued a terse statement: White Pine Pass closed indefinitely. Translation: forever. The HOA went quiet. No glossy newsletters, no cheerful updates. Just a single line on the Ridgeview Pines website. All board activities temporarily suspended pending review. Emails trickled into my inbox from neighbors, some sheepish, some grateful, some angry at themselves, more than anyone. Russell, we truly didn't grasp how bad it became up there. Thank you for stepping in when no one else knew what to do. Can we discuss a real emergency plan for the neighborhood? 3 days later, a soft knock sounded at the door. Clarissa Duvall stood on my porch in a simple wool coat, no makeup hair, pulled back plainly. In one hand, a manila envelope, in the other, a thermos. May I come in? Allison was outside, brushing frost from the rosemary. She glanced over, arched a brow, but said nothing. I stepped aside. Braver than I gave you credit for. I've had time to reflect, she said quietly. She entered slowly as though the house might judge her. Placed the envelope on the dining table. The board has scheduled a special election, she said. I submitted my resignation, effective immediately. I nodded, not surprised. I also filed an amended report with the county. She continued. Full acknowledgement of responsibility for reopening the pass without proper safeguards. They may pursue civil or administrative action. They should, I said, not harshly. She accepted it with a small nod. Then she offered the thermos. Allison mentioned you prefer dark roast. I lifted an eyebrow. You spoke with my wife. She made me wait on the porch 15 minutes. Clarissa admitted a faint, rueful smile, touching her lips. Said you'd earned that much. We sat. She cradled her own cup, but didn't drink. I left mine untouched. You're not the woman I assumed you were, I said after a moment. And I'm not the leader I pretended to be, she replied. I was so desperate to prove I could unify this place to make it feel safe and perfect that I stopped listening. Not just to you, to reason itself. You didn't stop listening, I corrected gently. You only heard the voices that agreed with you. The words landed. She didn't flinch away. Will they ever forgive me? She asked, voice small. No, I said honestly, not everyone. And maybe they shouldn't. She looked down. But some might respect you, I went on, if you keep showing up without expecting applause. She drew a long breath, steadying herself. You're a hard man, Russell. No, I've just seen too many second chances wasted on pride. Outside meltwater dripped steadily from the eaves, a quiet, persistent rhythm, like the mountain exhaling. Clarissa rose. I won't take more of your time, she said. I only needed to say it in person. Saying it is the beginning, I replied. At the door, she paused, glanced back. You know, I used to believe community meant control. Schedule everything, brand everything, enforce everything, then people would feel secure. Turns out community is forged in the mess, in the storm. When no one's in charge and everyone chooses to help anyway. I gave a small smile. Welcome to the neighborhood. She left without another word. For the first time since moving to Ridgeview Pines, the air felt lighter. The HOA hadn't vanished, but it had been humbled. The storm had redrawn boundaries no bylaw ever could between authority and accountability, between image and truth. That Sunday, the community gathered at the rec center, not a formal meeting, not an event, just a potluck. No board table, no agenda. Neighbors brought casseroles, soups, pies. Children chased each other under dripping icicles. People shared photos from the rescue, the terrifying ones, and the absurd ones, a minivan with cardboard reindeer antlers, half buried a snowcat towing a garland-draped Jeep. Someone pressed a hand-drawn card into my palm. Thank you, Mr. Merrick, for saving my brother. Avery shot 8. I stood outside afterward, watching the low sun gild the snowbanks. Allison slipped her arm through mine. You're not just the guy with the plow anymore. Never was, I said. She smiled. Going to run for the board? I laughed, the sound surprising me. Hell no. I just pulled them out of the snow. I'm not ready to manage their landscaping disputes. We walked home slowly, boots sinking into softening drifts. Winter lingered, but something fundamental had shifted. Not only the weather. The mountain remembered. The people remembered. And sometimes remembering is where real change begins. The weeks that followed carried a strange, fragile calm. Ridgeview Pines looked much the same on the surface, neat lawns buried under lingering snow. Holiday lights still twinkling from eaves, but the neighborhood felt different, as though the mountain had exhaled and everyone had finally inhaled. Mailboxes no longer fluttered with HOA flyers. The community forum, once buzzing with complaints about fence colors and holiday display wattage, now hosted quiet threads titled Emergency Preparedness Workshop and Thank You Potluck Planning. Someone even started a shared document lessons from White Pine. I kept my distance from most of it. I'd done my part on the ridge. I wasn't eager to chair committees. Yet the gratitude arrived in small, steady waves. A tin of homemade cookies left on the porch with a simple note for keeping my family warm. A teenager from the rec center stopping by to ask if I'd teach an extra winter survival class. Jim Coursey shoveling my driveway without being asked, muttering, "Least I can do after ignoring you." Allison watched it all with quiet amusement. "You're becoming a local legend whether you like it or not." "I just want my coffee in peace," I grumbled, but I couldn't hide the warmth it stirred. One gray afternoon, Melissa came home from school clutching an envelope addressed to me in careful 8th grade handwriting. Inside was a letter from the Pine Ridge charter principal formally thanking me for extraordinary service under extreme conditions and enclosing a class photo. 23 children waving from the bus steps, the driver beaming beside them. On the back, every child had signed their name, some in crayon, some in shaky marker. At the bottom, in bold letters, "We are your team, Mr. Merrick." I pinned it to the refrigerator without a word. Clarissa remained absent from public view. No one knew quite where she'd gone. Some said she was staying with family out of state, others that she was simply keeping her head down. The special election came and went quietly. A new interim board was seated, made up mostly of quieter voices who'd never sought the spotlight. Then, on a crisp Saturday in early February, another knock sounded. Clarissa again. This time, she wore jeans and a plain parka, hair in a simple ponytail, no envelope, no thermos, just herself. Allison answered the door, studied her for a long moment, then stepped aside without comment. Clarissa hovered in the entryway. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she began. "I just wanted you to know I've been attending every county safety briefing since the incident, taking notes, learning." I nodded, waiting. "I've also enrolled in the basic wilderness first aid course you teach at the rec center," she added, cheeks coloring slightly. "If there's still space." "There is," I said. She exhaled as though she'd been holding that breath for weeks. "I sold the Range Rover," she continued quietly. "Bought a used Subaru with all-wheel drive and a proper winter kit. Figured symbolism matters." A small smile tugged at my mouth despite myself. "I'm not looking for redemption on a schedule," she said. "I know some bridges stay burned, but I intend to show up quietly, consistently, until people decide for themselves what my presence is worth." She met my eyes steady now. "Thank you for not letting me run from what I caused. And for pulling me out of that car when I didn't deserve it." "You didn't deserve to freeze," I replied. "No one does." She nodded once, turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. The new board asked if you'd consult on an emergency response plan. No title, no obligation. Just your experience when you have time." I glanced at Allison. She lifted an eyebrow. "Your call." "Send me the draft," I said. "I'll read it." Clarissa's shoulders eased a fraction. "Thank you." After she left, Melissa peeked around the corner. "Was that the parade lady?" "It was," Allison answered. "Is she okay?" "She's trying to be," I said. Spring crept in slowly that year. Snowbanks shrank to dirty ridges, then vanished altogether. The pass remained gated, a new permanent sign bolted in place, closed. Hazardous conditions. One Sunday in April, the rec center hosted its first community safety fair. No fanfare, just folding tables with checklists, demonstrations on tire chains, a kiddie booth for packing stay-warm bags. I ran a short session on reading mountain weather signs. The room filled beyond capacity, neighbors, teenagers, even a few former board members taking notes in the back. Clarissa sat in the last row pen, moving steadily, eyes forward. Afterward, a little girl from the charter bus, recognizable by her bright purple coat, tugged my sleeve. "Mr. Merrick, we made you something." She handed me a laminated card, a crayon drawing of a yellow bus surrounded by stick figure children holding hands with a tall figure in a rescue jacket. Beneath it, in teacher-guided letters, "Thank you for being our hero when we needed one." I crouched to her level. "You were all pretty heroic yourselves that day." She grinned, gap-toothed and proud. As the crowd thinned, Clarissa approached hesitantly. "Good session," she said simply. "Thanks for coming." She hesitated, then added, "I've started volunteering with the county's community alert system. Data entry for now. It's grounding." I nodded. "Keep showing up." "I will." She walked away without lingering. That evening, Allison, Melissa, and I took our first hike of the season, a gentle trail far from White Pine. Wildflowers pushed through the thinning snow, stubborn and bright. Halfway up, Melissa asked, "Do you think the neighborhood's really changed, Dad?" I thought of Clarissa's quiet presence in the back row, of neighbors learning to read barometric pressure instead of arguing over lawn height, of children who now knew what a thermal blanket was for. Not perfect, I said, but humbled. And that's a start. Allison squeezed my hand. The mountain loomed behind us, serene under clearing skies. It had spoken once loud and clear. We had finally learned to listen. Years later, when people asked how Ridgeview Pines had changed, I never knew quite what to say. It hadn't become perfect. We still argued over trash pickup schedules and whose dog barked too much at dawn. But something essential had shifted like a fault line that settles after the quake. The pass stayed closed. A sturdy gate and a weathered sign marked the entrance, now White Pine Pass, permanently closed due to hazardous conditions. Wildflowers claimed the old fire road each summer, and teenagers dared each other to hike it on foot, though none ever went far once they felt the wind shift. The HOA reformed quietly. No more glossy presidents in red blazers. The new board met in jeans and flannels, agendas posted plainly online. Emergency preparedness became standing item number 1. They installed weather stations on neighborhood rooftops, stocked community warming shelters, and ran annual drills that every family was encouraged, not required, to attend. I consulted when asked. Nothing official. Just an old guy with maps and stories teaching folks how to read the sky the way I'd learned the hard way. Clarissa stayed. She never sought office again. Instead, she became the person who showed up first when someone needed help moving furniture after a flood, or when an elderly neighbor's driveway needed shoveling before a forecast storm. She volunteered with the county alert network, entering data late into the night, cross-checking forecasts against satellite feeds. At the rec center, she assisted with my survival classes, setting up stations, handing out blankets, listening more than speaking. One spring evening, after a session on avalanche beacons, she lingered while the room emptied. "I never properly thanked you," she said. "You have," I replied, "every time you show up." She smiled, smaller now, genuine. I used to think leadership meant being out front waving the biggest flag. Turns out it sometimes means carrying the heaviest pack at the back of the line, making sure no one gets left behind. I nodded. "You're doing fine." She glanced out the window toward the distant ridge, now green and gentle, in the softening light. "I still dream about it sometimes," she admitted. "The white, the silence. Your hand on the door. We all carry pieces of that day," I said. "Best we can do is let them teach us." Melissa grew up fast in those years. She took my classes, then started teaching the younger kids how to pack a go bag, how to spot black ice, how to trust your gut when the adults are too busy being certain. She'd come home with stories of children who now refused to drive anywhere in winter without thermal blankets in the trunk. "Dad," she said one night over dinner, "Avery, the girl from the bus, she drew me a picture today. Said you taught her that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they just refuse to look away." Allison reached across the table, squeezed my hand. I thought of the charter bus kids, now teenagers themselves, some stopping by to say hello when they visited grandparents. I thought of the young woman from the teetering SUV who sent a graduation photo years later with a note, "Because of you, I became a paramedic." I thought of Clarissa quietly restocking the community shelter before every forecast storm. Change didn't arrive with fanfare. It came in small, stubborn acts. Neighbors checking on each other after wind warnings, families keeping CB radios charged, just in case, children learning that beauty and safety aren't the same thing. One December evening, the anniversary of the parade that never reached its destination, Allison and I stood on the porch again. Snow fell soft and steady, the kind that dusts without menace. The ridge stood dark against a starlit sky, peaceful. "Think it'll ever happen again?" Allison asked. "Someone forgetting what the mountain can do." "Probably," I said. "Mountains have long memories, but people have short ones." She leaned into me. But this time I added, there are more of us who remember. Lights glowed warmly in windows down the street. Somewhere a family laughed over cocoa. Somewhere else, a new neighbor asked an old one about tire chains. The storm had taken nothing in the end. It had given us back each other. And sometimes, in the deepest winter, that's the only warmth that truly lasts. The mountains slept quietly beyond the homes. We had learned finally to keep watch together.